I still get chills when I talk about this, but I feel it's important to share my story because our intuition could have saved our lives on that trip. And in all honesty, I still have no idea what the cabin owner's intentions were and whether we were entertainment to him or if he intended to ditch us in the riverbed. I want others to be aware that our intuition is there for a reason, and it could be the difference between life and death. Here goes. We rented the cabin for 4 nights, just a short break. The listing said it was in a river valley about 40 minutes outside the nearest town, a destination where many go to walk, read, and escape the outside world. It looked quiet, idyllic. The drive-in should have been my first clue about how isolated it really was. The main road turned into a smaller one, then a narrower one, then finally into a gravel track with a small wooden sign that had the cabin's name burned into it. There wasn't another building anywhere nearby, just trees, wet leaves, and that quiet you only get in places without traffic. We arrived late Thursday afternoon. The light was already starting to thin out between the trees. The cabin itself looked exactly like the photos. Clean, neat, almost staged. There was a lockbox on the door with a key inside. No one came to greet us. Inside, everything looked normal. A small living room, compact kitchen, and 1 bedroom. An ensuite bathroom. Honestly, it was quaint. We were both looking forward for some time to reset and relax. We unpacked and set about making coffee to drink on the front porch. When I tried to use a tap, I noticed the first small thing, or it would sputter and then just give up. The shower did the same thing. When we woke up the next morning, the stove had gone out in the night. Maybe I hadn't loaded it properly. Maybe the flue was weird. Over the course of Saturday, the little things kept stacking up. None of them were serious, just mildly annoying. We didn't text the owner right away. We tried to deal with it ourselves. It wasn't until Friday evening, after the stove went out again, that we finally sat down and decided to ask. I sent a message about the issues we were having, asking if there was a specific knack to using the sink and stove. The reply came back almost immediately. It buzzed in my hand. He told us exactly what to do. I remember thinking it was oddly fast, but then shrugging it off. I even said, he must get the messages all the time. That made sense. It felt normal. That night, after we'd eaten and were sitting in the living room, we heard 2 light taps on the front door. Not exactly a knock, just tap, tap. We both froze. I got up and checked. There was no one there. Just the damp leaves and wind rustling the trees. I stood there for a while, listening. But nothing else happened that night. We told ourselves it was probably an animal or something cooling and shifting in the wood. We were in an old cabin, in nature after all. But the cabin didn't feel the same after that. The next morning, we noticed footprints in the mud near the back door. They weren't ours. We sat in the kitchen for a long time talking quietly about it, just trying to make it make sense. We wondered if the owner had come by, but if he had, why wouldn't he knock? Why would he leave without saying anything? And why the back door? In the end, we decided to ask. He replied quickly again, said he hadn't been there, said no one else should be on the property. He offered to come by and check. We agreed. He arrived about an hour later. He was polite, middle-aged, dressed like someone who owns cabins in the woods. He walked around with us, looked at the ground, checked the doors. He said he didn't see anything unusual, but something about him made my skin crawl. I couldn't tell you what exactly. Nothing he said was wrong. Nothing he did was strange. I just didn't relax while he was there. When he left, the cabin felt quiet again, but not in a good way. We talked about leaving. We didn't. We told ourselves we were overreacting. That evening, my partner went to take a shower. I was sitting on the bed, scrolling through my phone when it buzzed. It was the owner. Just a heads up, the hot water takes a minute to come through sometimes. I stared at the screen. We hadn't texted him. We hadn't mentioned the shower. I went to the bathroom door and asked my partner if she'd messaged him. She hadn't. A few minutes later, she came back into the room and said, "The water pressure thing is still weird." My phone buzzed again. The pressure dips if you open it too fast. That was the moment everything shifted. I was certain we were being watched. We started looking at the cabin differently. The smoke detector, the gaps in the shiplap, the knickknacks. Once you start looking, you see them. That was the worst part. At first, it was just a vague feeling that the cabin looked different, not in any specific way, just charged. I stood in the middle of the bedroom and let my eyes move slowly, not searching yet, just taking it in. The smoke detector above the door, the small thermostat on the wall, the ornaments on the shelves. My heart started to beat harder, and I had to force myself to keep my breathing steady. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I told myself that there were normal explanations for all of it. But as I moved things around, trying not to look like I was just being nosy, I got a better view of a figure on the shelves that looked like it had a hole in it. It didn't feel like fear at first. It felt like something colder, like the moment right before you feel sick. There was a small, black lens. I didn't call out. I didn't move suddenly. I didn't even look toward the rest of the room. I took my phone out and typed with my thumb, trying to act naturally. Don't react. Don't look. Act normal. I then navigated to my camera app, trying to look like I was still typing. A few seconds passed, then my phone buzzed in my hand. "What is it?" my partner texted. I stepped back, then I typed, "There's a camera in the bedroom. We need to leave. But we need to do it like nothing's wrong." After a long pause, my partner replied, "What do we do?" We made a plan through messages, sitting in the same room, barely looking at each other. My partner was trembling, but she was trying her best to act normal. I made us both coffee so that we could pass off not talking as just having a sleepy start to the day. It was about 4 a.m. at this point, so I messaged her. We'd pretend we were going out for the day, a sunrise hike, to explain the early hour. There was a trail down the road a ways. We'd only take what we absolutely needed. We'd leave most of our things so it looked like we were coming back, I said, and we would not, under any circumstances, rush. I filled a thermos, water bottles, and grabbed some pastries we brought with us from the kitchen to make it convincing, and made a show of putting a picnic together. It took everything I had to pace myself, to not whisk my wife out of there. I wanted to comfort her. I could see she was ashen. I talked out loud about trails and weather and what time we should leave to catch the sunrise. My hands were shaking, I kept thinking about the ceilings, about the corners, about where else he might be watching from. We loaded the car slowly, backpacks with the picnic, a few clothes, wallets, phones, keys. We left the rest. I pulled away with deliberate control, trying not to put my foot down too heavily. We drove for a long time before either of us spoke. When we were finally far enough away that the trees thinned and there were other cars on the road, I pulled over and called the police. My voice didn't sound like mine. They listened, actually listened. They asked calm, specific questions. And then, to my surprise, they said they'd meet us and go back with us. I didn't relax until I saw the station. When we drove back out there with 2 police cars behind us, my stomach felt hollow the entire way. When we drove back with the police, the owner was already there. He was standing near the porch when we pulled in. He looked annoyed as he watched the cars come up the track. He asked what they were doing there. The officer told him to step aside while we collected our belongings. When the officer asked to escort us inside, the cabin owner refused. He insisted he couldn't enter without a warrant. So instead, the officer stayed close while we went inside and packed. We just threw everything into our suitcases, didn't bother packing up any food. The owner stayed by the porch the entire time, watching us with a dark look on his face while we loaded the car. The officer told us to hop in. He'd be right behind us and to meet him at the station. He was a genuinely kind man. He made us coffee, told my partner to bring in the blanket she'd had with her in the car, and said it was important he take our statements right away. We told him about all the odd things, but that, aside from the last message, finding the camera, that there wasn't much that had happened, luckily. I showed him the photo I had taken on my phone, and he said he would put in for a warrant right away. He said he thought we were very, very smart to leave the way we did, and that things may have turned out very differently otherwise. A few weeks later, an officer from the station called me back. He said that they had confirmed that there were cameras in the cabin, and that they'd found the same setup in at least 2 other properties owned by the same man. He didn't go into detail about what they'd found or what else might be involved. He just said they were looking into it, and that it wasn't something that was going to be wrapped up quickly. Months passed, then more months. I called once to ask if there was any update. The answer was the same. The investigation was ongoing, and they couldn't share anything yet. The last time I checked, it had been over a year. I still think about how quickly he answered those messages, and how he always seemed to know what we were doing, and sometimes, when I catch myself noticing small details in a room too carefully, I think about that cabin and wonder how long we'd been watched before we ever realized we weren't alone. He seemed to have his eyes in every room, and it makes me feel sick to think about what his intentions were. And I still catch myself wondering how many other people stayed in those cabins without ever realizing they weren't as alone as they thought. Or worse, they did. The fact that the investigation has been going on for so long makes bile rise in my throat. I haven't voiced this to my partner. I just hope she doesn't make the connection. It's the thought that makes your stomach turn, isn't it? Not just that there was a camera, but wondering how many hours of footage existed before they looked up. How many mundane, private moments were being watched in real time. That cold feeling they described, that's your lizard brain trying to save you. But sometimes the danger is the isolation itself, and the things that happen when there's no one around to witness them. But what happens when you aren't being watched from afar? What happens when you're being lured? We like to think that locals in small towns are just part of the scenery. Helpful, quiet people who know the roads better than we do. We trust them for directions, for advice, or for a place to find a cold drink at the end of a long drive. But blind trust isn't always a good thing. Like many stories, good and bad, it started with a beer. We were in North Georgia, on the kind of back roads where the GPS gets turned around and the trees close in. Mark drove. I rode shotgun with maps open on my phone. I had Cheeto dust on my hands, and I was getting in a mess. We'd planned the weekend on a whim. We wanted to get away from it all. We were on a high, but Mark had been driving for hours and declared that he needed to grab a coffee and was going to pull off as soon as we found a place. But it seemed like shops, cafes, civilization was getting more sparse the farther we drove. The grocery store was the last real building we saw. It sat off the road in a low strip of dying light, a single row of parking spaces. The inside smelled kind of musty. A radio played behind the deli counter, but the song kept fading in and out. We were in a good mood. Mark grabbed his coffee. I grabbed us some waters. It was pretty hot and humid, and I wanted to grab some beers for when we got there. We drifted to the back and found a small cooler. The beer aisle was there too. Empty shelves, a few dusty cardboard price tags still taped down. Mark whistled and looked over at me. "Maybe they got it behind the counter," he said. At the register, the cashier was a woman about my age, with tired eyes and a neat braid. She scanned our snacks without looking up much. When Mark asked about beer, she stopped with her hand on the scanner and finally met his eyes. "Dry County," she said. Mark leaned an elbow on the counter. "We're camping. Any place that sells it?" She didn't answer right away. She glanced over at the manager's office like she expected someone to hear her. Then she lowered her voice. "There's a bar right over the line," she said. 10 minutes. You take 60 east, then you'll see a turnoff with a white fence. Hang a left. It's there." "A bar?" Mark said, like he couldn't believe the luck. She nodded once. "Just over. You'll see it." "Can we buy beer there to take it with us?" I asked. Her mouth tightened for a second. "They got what you need." She pushed the receipt towards us and smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile you give to end a conversation. Outside, the air was stifling. The sky was turning that deep blue that comes right before dark in the mountains. Mark tossed the bags into the back seat. "Bar sounds good," he said. "One drink, then camp." I slid into the passenger seat and shut the door. I checked my phone. One bar of service, flickering. I pulled up the map and typed bar into search engine. Nothing loaded. The map just sat there, spinning. Mark started the engine and rolled out. At first, the drive looked normal. 2-lane road, trees on both sides. Then the houses thinned out, and the road dipped and curved. The sun vanished behind the ridgeline, and the shadows filled in. We joked because it felt better than being quiet. 10 minutes to get murdered, Mark said, grinning. Stop, I told him, but I laughed. Don't say that. You ever seen Deliverance? He asked. I've seen enough of it, I said. Keep driving. He made a little banjo sound with his mouth and glanced over at me. He was doing it to keep things light. I let him. I watched the road and the trees sliding past. The woods were dense. There were no signs of life. The smell in the car shifted as we climbed, pine and old leaves coming in through a crack in Mark's window. After a while, the map on my phone gave up. It cantered on our last known spot and froze. There's no service, I said. Mark tapped the steering wheel. We'll just follow directions. He slowed down and he saw the white fence. It was low, half collapsed in places, running along a field that looked unused. The turnoff was easy to miss. A narrow strip of gravel cut into the woods. Mark turned left. The gravel road was rough. The tires popped over stones and the car rocked. Branches leaned in close. I could see our headlights catch the bark of trees at the edge of the road. Beyond that was just dark. You think this is right? I asked. It matches what she said, Mark replied. We drove for maybe a minute. The road widened into a small clearing. A building that looked more like a log cabin sat in the center like it had been dropped there and forgotten. There was no sign, no neon, no painted name, no open sign in the window, because there were no windows. They had been boarded up. A single light bulb hung above a screen door at the front. The bulb was bare and yellow. It didn't light much, just a small circle of dirt and weeds, and the shape of the door. There were no other cars, no music, no chatter. Mark rolled forward slowly and stopped a few yards back from the entrance. He kept the engine running. We sat there, both of us quiet now, and listened. The car's idle sounded too loud. The fan was on low, and I could hear it pushing air. My own breathing sounded tight in my ears. This is it, Mark said, but he didn't sound sure. I looked at the building again. The boarded-up windows made my stomach feel wrong. A place that sells drinks wants you to see inside. It wants light. This place just looked like an abandoned cabin. Mark forced a laugh. Maybe it's a speakeasy. Maybe it's not a bar, I said. He leaned forward and squinted through the windshield. There's a door. A door doesn't mean it's open, I said. The light bulb buzzed once. It flickered, then steadied. I glanced down at my phone. The screen was dark. I pressed the side button. No signal. I swiped the camera, held it up, zoomed in. On the screen, the building looked even worse. The dark swallowed the edges. The screen door had a tear in the mesh near the handle. Mark shifted in his seat. I watched his hand move toward the gear shift, then stop. We could just check it out, he said. Absolutely not. I'm staying here, I told him. He looked at me. The grin was gone. Come on, he proceeded. I shook my head. No. He glanced at the door again. It's probably fine. We stared out at the cabin again. Something small scraped outside, somewhere near the building. It was quick and light, like a boot toe catching on gravel. Mark stopped moving, his eyes fixed on the front of the building. You heard that? He asked, voice lower now. Yeah, I replied. We listened harder. The car engine idled, the fan hummed, nothing else. Mark swallowed and tried to make it a joke again. Probably a raccoon. Maybe, I said, but my hands were already tight on my knees. He took his foot off the brake slightly. The car rolled an inch, then stopped. He put it back. We both stared at the dark around the building, the edges where the lights didn't reach. Let's just go, I said. Mark nodded too fast, like he'd been waiting for me to say it again. He shifted into reverse. The car's headlights swept across the weeds and the building front as he turned the wheel. For a second, the beams caught something near the sidewall, a vertical movement, like someone stepping back behind the corner. Mark hit the brake hard. What? I said, already leaning forward. Did you see that? He asked. I saw something move, I said. The silence after that felt heavier. My skin prickled along my arms. I could feel sweat start under my shirt, even though the night air was cool. Mark's right hand stayed on the wheel. His left hand hovered near the door lock switch. Maybe it's just... He started. A new sound came, close to the car. A soft thump against the rear quarter panel, like a palm pressing and letting go. It wasn't a bump from backing into something. We hadn't moved. Mark jerked his head to look in the side mirror. My pulse jumped so hard it made my stomach lurch. Something moved again near the back of the car. I couldn't see it directly. The mirror showed only darkness and the edge of the building. Then the thumb came again, more deliberate. Mark's breath went fast. I could hear it. The passenger window behind me had a thin layer of dust on it from the gravel road. I turned and looked over my shoulder through that glass. At first, I saw nothing. Then, I caught a shift of shadow, low and close. It was too dark to make out if it was a person, but it was close enough that I could see the dust smear on the glass where something brushed it. Mark's hand shot down and hit the lock button. The car doors thumped shut all at once. Immediately, something pulled on Mark's rear door handle. Just one quick pull. The hand lifted, hit the lock, dropped. I couldn't stop the noise that came out of me. Mark's face went pale in the dashboard light. The handle moved again. 2 pulls this time, spaced apart. A pause between them that felt measured. Whoever it was trying to open the door. Mark's foot pressed the gas in a sudden surge. The car lurched backward. At the same time, something slapped the trunk lid, flattened hard. The sound filled the car. Mark twisted the wheel. Gravel sprayed. The car fishtailed. I grabbed the armrest so hard, my nails bit into my skin. The seatbelt cut across my collarbone as the car swung. We spun just enough that the headlights swept past the front of the building again and across the clearing. In that brief sweep, I saw a shape in the grass near where the gravel road began. A person standing still. I saw the shine of eyes for a split second, then the light passed as it was gone. Mark hit the gas harder. The tires caught and we shot down the gravel road. Branches slapped the sides of the car. The sound was frantic, fast. The rear of the car bounced and rattled. I kept turning to look behind us. The headlights didn't show much back there, just darkness and the tunnel of the road. Then I saw something else, a second set of lights. They were low, yellowish, and they came on all at once, as if someone had been sitting in the dark with their engine off. The lights jumped forward and started following. "Someone's behind us," I said. Mark didn't answer. His jaw was clenched. His hands were locked on the wheel. The gravel road straightened and then dipped. The car behind us stayed close enough that the lights filled our rear window. Not close enough to hit us, but close enough to pressure. The road narrowed at a bend. Mark slowed just enough to take it, and the following lights slowed too, matching him. That did something to me. My mouth went dry. "I think they want us to pull over," I said. Mark's voice came out tight. "Not happening." His phone was in the cup holder. He grabbed it with one hand, flicked it on, and tossed it toward me. "Call someone," he said. I stared at the screen. No service. The little bars were empty. I opened the dial pad anyway and tried 911. It didn't connect. It just sat there, then failed. "No signal," I told him. "Of course," he snapped. The gravel road ended and dumped us back onto the 2-lane. Mark swung the wheel right without slowing much. The car jolted as the tires hit pavement. The following lights came right after. A clean turn, no hesitation. We were back on the main road, but still deep in the woods. There was no moon visible, no houses, no porch lights. Just our headlights and theirs behind us. Mark pushed the speed up. The road curved and rose and dropped. The car behind us stayed close. When Mark slowed for a curve, they slowed. When he sped up, they sped up. I kept looking over my shoulder, watching the spacing. It stayed exact. They weren't tailgating, but they wouldn't fall back. We came to a long straightaway. Mark floored it. The engine strained. The speedometer climbed. The trees blurred my vision. The car behind us didn't fade away. Their lights stayed the same distance. My fingers started to cramp around the phone. Up ahead, the road split. A small sign flashed in our headlights, too fast to read. Mark swore under his breath. "Which way?" he said. "I don't know," I said. "I can't see." "Left or right?" he said, voice rising. I leaned forward, squinting at the signpost as it came closer. The lettering was too faded. "Go right," I said, because I had to choose something. Mark took the right fork. The following lights took it too, immediate, still without hesitation. My stomach dropped. Mark hit the steering wheel with the heel of his palm, hard. The sound was sharp and angry. "Where the hell is the highway?" he said. "We came off 60, I said. "I think." "You think?" he said, but it wasn't aimed at me. It was just fear spilling out. The road went downhill, and the trees thinned for a moment. There was a low field on the left and a line of fence. In the distance, I saw a small light, steady and white. "Light," I said. "Up there." Mark leaned forward. "A house?" he asked. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe a store." As we got closer, we could see it was a small building with 2 gas pumps out front. One of those old rural stations, the kind with a cracked concrete pad and a dim canopy light. It looked closed, but the light was on. Mark aimed for it without a word. As we pulled into the lot, I looked back. The car behind us slowed on the road, but didn't turn in right away. Their headlights stayed on the pavement. Mark stopped beside the pumps. He kept the engine running. His hands trembled on the wheel. I stared at the station's dark windows. The door was locked. A sign on the door said closed. The car that followed us rolled past the entrance slow, then kept going. The red glow of their taillights pulled away into the dark until they vanished. Mark exhaled a long breath through his teeth, like he'd been holding it without realizing. We sat there, Neither of us moved. The car's interior smelled like warm plastic and sweat. After maybe 30 seconds, I realized my right hand hurt. I looked down. My fingernail on my index finger was torn halfway up where I'd gripped the phone. A thin line of blood ran along the side of the nail and pulled at the cuticle. "Damn," I whispered. Mark glanced at it. His eyes were wide and shiny. "You okay?" "Fine," I said. "Let's get out of here," Mark continued. He put the car in drive. I grabbed his arm without thinking. My hand left a faint smear on his sleeve. "Wait," I said. "Listen." Mark froze. We sat again, silent. At first, there was only the hum of the engine. Then, faint, I heard tires on gravel. Not our gravel. Somewhere behind the station, off to the side. I turned my head toward the dark. A smell drifted in through the vents. Not gas. Something sour and heavy, like old beer spilled on cloth. It hit the back of my throat. Mark's eyes flicked toward me. He smelled it too. I saw it in the way his nostrils flared once, quick. The tires on gravel sound stopped. A pause. Then, from somewhere close to the passenger side, a soft scrape, like a shoe scuffing concrete. The scrape came again, closer, then stopped. Another pause. Too clean, too timed. I stared at the dark beyond my window, trying to see through the reflection of our dashboard. Nothing moved that I could catch, but I felt a pressure in the air, like someone standing just outside the beam of the canopy light. Then the faintest thing, a tap against the passenger side rear window. Not hard, just enough to make the glass click. I couldn't stop my shoulders from jumping. Mark hit the gas and turned hard out of the lot, tires squealing on the cracked concrete. The canopy light swung across the hood as we left. For a fraction of a second, the passenger side mirror caught a pale shape near the edge of the station's wall. A shoulder and part of an arm, close enough that my stomach dropped. Then we were back on the road. Mark drove fast, both hands on the wheel, eyes wide, fixed. He didn't talk. I didn't either. We stayed on the road until it met a bigger one. We hit a stretch with occasional houses and mailboxes. A dog barked from somewhere in the dark as we passed. When we finally saw a set of proper streetlights, my chest loosened a bit. When we passed another car going in the other direction, normal headlights and normal speed, I almost cried from relief. I didn't. I just swallowed hard. Mark pulled into a well-lit parking lot in front of a 24-hour diner. The sign hummed. A few cars sat scattered. A group of teenagers leaned against a pickup, laughing. Mark parked and killed the engine. The sudden quiet made my ears ring. We both sat there for a moment, hands still in place, like we were waiting for something to happen. Mark finally spoke. His voice was flat. "We're not going back to that campsite tonight." I nodded. My throat felt tight. "Yeah," I agreed. "We go to the campground office," he said, "or a motel. I don't care." "We should tell someone," I said. Mark shook his head once. "Tell them what?" He sounded angry, but it wasn't at me. It was at the fact that he couldn't point to a clear thing and make it go away. I looked through the windshield at the diner's front door. People went in and out. The sound of laughter carried. "We saw someone," I said quietly, "at the building. And we had someone behind us, and someone at the station." Mark's hands were on his thighs. They were shaking. He nodded, like it hurt to agree. Yeah. We went inside the diner and sat in a booth facing the door. That was Mark's choice. He slid in and angled his body so he could see outside. I did the same without thinking. The waitress brought water. My hand left a red smear on the glass when I picked it up. "You cut yourself?" she asked. "Tore a nail," I replied. She handed me a stack of napkins without asking more. I wrapped my finger again and held it tight. Mark ordered coffee, even though it was late. I ordered nothing. My stomach was in knots. I listened to every sound, the door chime, the scrape of chairs, the hiss of the coffee machine. I watched the reflections in the window behind Mark. We told ourselves we'd calm down, then decide what to do. We didn't calm down. We stayed there for almost an hour. Every time headlights passed the window, my shoulders tensed. Every time the door opened, I looked. Mark did too. When we finally left, we drove straight to a motel on the edge of a bigger town. It wasn't nice. It had bright lights and thin curtains. In the room, Mark shoved a chair under the door handle before he even took his shoes off. I washed my finger in the sink. The nail was split deep enough that the skin beside it was raw. Water hit it, and the pain jumped hard. I hissed and held my hand under the faucet anyway, until the blood was gone. I wrapped it with toilet paper and tape from my bag. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every time the AC clicked on, I woke up. Every time a car door slammed outside, I sat up. Mark slept in fits too, rolling over, muttering once, then going still again. In the morning, the sun made everything look ordinary. The parking lot was full of normal cars. A maintenance man whistled while working on a light fixture. The world acted like nothing had happened. We talked about what had happened over breakfast and decided we would see if we could book into a different campsite in the opposite direction to that weird place, because we didn't want to waste the weekend. We set up camp in the daylight. We stayed close to our site. We smiled at people. We acted like we were there to relax. That afternoon, while Mark gathered firewood, I went to fill our water jug and ended up talking to two guys at the spigot. They looked local, mud on their boots, sun on their necks. They asked where we were from. I told them. They asked how we liked it so far. I said it was beautiful. I said it was quiet. Mark came back and, like an idiot, mentioned the bar across the county line. He said it like it was a story, like it was a funny thing that almost happened. Both guys stopped doing what they were doing. One of them frowned. "What bar?" Mark described it. No sign. Boarded up windows. One bulb over the door. The first guy shook his head immediately. "That ain't a bar," he said. The second guy's mouth tightened. He glanced off toward the trees like he didn't want to look at us when he said it. "Been here my whole life," he said. "That place ain't never been open. Folks don't go up there." Mark tried to keep it casual. "Cashier at the store told us." The first guy snorted once, short. "Who told you?" Mark described her, the braid, the tired eyes. The second guy rubbed his jaw. "You sure it was her?" he asked. Mark hesitated. "Yeah." The first guy leaned closer a bit. His voice dropped. "You don't drive up there at night," he said. "You hear me? You got lucky." My stomach tightened again like it had the night before. I asked, "Lucky how?" He didn't answer right away. He picked up his jug and tightened the cap, buying time. Then he looked at me. "People get ideas," he said. "They see out-of-towners. They see cars with coolers. They think you got cash, phones, whatever." The second guy added quieter. Some folks like to scare people for fun first. Mark's face had gone blank. We were followed, he said. The second guy's eyes flicked to Mark, then away again. A small nod. Yeah, he said. That sounds right. I stood there with my water jug and felt my pulse in my torn nail. It throbbed with each beat. The injury felt stupid and small compared to everything else, but it grounded me. It was proof I hadn't made it up. We went back to our site and didn't talk much. We kept our food locked in the car. We kept our phones charged. We kept the keys in the tent with us. When it got dark, we didn't leave the fire ring. The weekend ended without anything else happening. Even now, months later, I still catch myself checking the rearview mirror too often when I'm on an empty road. If someone pulls in behind me and stays there, my shoulders tighten. I'm careful about directions from strangers. I keep my doors locked the moment I get in the car, even in daylight, even in a parking lot full of people. Most importantly, I trust my gut. If something or someone feels off, I listen to that feeling. Folks don't go up there. That is the phrase that stays with you. It's the realization that a stranger, someone you trusted for something as simple as directions, deliberately sent you into a dead-end trap. The original poster mentioned how that night changed them. The way they lock their car the second they get in. The way they constantly check the rearview mirror. It's a specific kind of paranoia that high-speed pavement and bright streetlights can't quite wash away. You start to realize that in the woods, the helpful local and the predator might be the exact same person. But in that situation, they had an engine and 4 wheels. They could drive until the gravel turned back into highway. Our next story removes the possibility of a getaway. I no longer accept solo maintenance callouts in winter, no matter how minor the problem is supposed to be. At the time, it was a straightforward job. One of the avalanche monitoring stations along the pass had been dropping in and out of the network. Not particularly unexpected with the changeable weather. The data stream was mostly intact, but the operations desk wanted someone to physically check the line and confirm it wasn't a loose connection or a falling power unit. There were 3 stations on that stretch, all tied back to a small service hut about 2 miles up the maintenance road. The plan was simple. Drive up, check the housings, connect to the terminal in the hut, confirm the logs, and come back down before the weather moved in. The forecast said light snow in the afternoon and heavier snow overnight. That kind of forecast is common there. The road authority keeps the hut stocked for a reason. By the time I reached the turnoff from the main road, the sky had already gone a dark gray. The temperature was just below freezing. Wind was steady, but not strong enough to be a problem yet. The maintenance road was narrow and cut into the slope. There are sections where the drop on one side is steep enough that you don't think about stopping until you're back on the main highway. I drove slowly, checked the markers, and kept the truck in low gear. The hut came into view as a low concrete shape pushed into the snowbank. One door, one small window, a radio mast bolted to the side. No other structures nearby. I checked the first sensor from the truck. It responded right away. The second one took longer, but eventually came back with a stable reading. The third one showed offline, which matched what the office had been seeing. I parked by the hut, grabbed my bag, and went inside. The heater made a grinding noise when I turned it on. The terminal was old and took a few minutes to boot. Those machines didn't use personal logs. They auto-signed into a local maintenance account on startup, so anyone on call could use them. You had to deliberately log out, and nobody ever did. While it was starting up, I wrote the time and conditions in the paper log. The wind was picking up. I could hear snow starting to move against the walls. When the terminal finally came up, I pulled the sensor network. The offline station had gone down 3 times in the last 24 hours. 2 others showed short resets. From the office, they'd assumed it was just the hut terminal briefly reinitializing the link. It looked like noise. The timestamps were spaced out in a way that didn't look completely random, but not in a way that meant anything on its own either. I told myself not to read into it. I put my jacket back on and went outside to physically inspect the nearest unit. Everything looked intact, no obvious damage, no loose cables. By the time I walked back to the hut, visibility had dropped enough that I could barely make out the truck from the door. The wind was strong enough now that snow was moving sideways. The road behind me was starting to fill in. I tried the radio, nothing but static. I tried my phone, no signal. That still wasn't a problem. The hut existed for this exact situation. I went back inside, closed the door, and locked it out of habit. I sat down at the desk and started writing up what I'd seen so far. About 40 minutes later, the terminal chimed. Sensor 3 online. I hadn't touched anything. I checked the screen again to make sure it wasn't just refreshing old data. It wasn't. The unit that had been offline was now reporting clean numbers. I stood up and went to the window, but there was nothing to see except blowing snow and the nearest marker pole. Then the terminal chimed again. Sensor 2 reset. I opened the event log. It showed a manual restart command from the hut terminal under the local maintenance account, which meant, technically, from me. I was standing across the room and hadn't touched the keyboard. I assumed it was a software fault. That system was old, and sometimes a bad handshake would log a reconnect as a manual restart. Procedure says you don't hard kill those terminals unless you have to. If you cut power at the wrong moment, they can corrupt the local logs. So I didn't unplug it yet. I sat back down and started a full reboot instead. While the terminal was restarting, the heater cut out. The room went quiet in a way that made me notice it immediately. Then the terminal finished booting. Sensor 1 reset. I looked at my hands before I looked back at the screen. All 3 sensors were now showing online. Then, one by one, they dropped offline again. Not together, in order. That was the moment my body decided before I did. I should leave. I grabbed my keys, put my jacket back on, and opened the door. The road was gone. The markers were barely visible. Everything else was moving white. Driving in that would either bury the truck or put it over the edge at the curve. I closed the door and locked it. Trying to drive in that was plain stupid. I went back to the desk. The terminal chimed again. Another manual reset. Same account. I unplugged the terminal from the wall and set the cable on the desk where I could see it. After that, the room stayed quiet except for the wind and the heater trying to restart. I sat on the cot with my gloves still on, listening to the walls and roof, and waiting for the noise of the storm to settle into something steady. About 10 minutes later, something struck the outside wall. It wasn't hard, but it was solid enough that I felt it through the floor. My first thought was snow sliding off the roof, and that was the explanation that made the most sense, even though the sound itself didn't quite match what I expected. When it happened again a while later, on the other side of the hut, I stayed where I was and told myself it was still the same thing, just shifting around in the wind. After that, nothing else happened for the rest of the night. I must have slept at some point, because I remember waking up with my neck stiff and my right hand numb from laying on it wrong. It took a while before I could close it properly. When I stood up, my knee slipped on the concrete, and I hit hard enough that I had to sit back down and wait for the pain to pass. By morning, the storm had eased enough that I could see where the road was again. I drove out slowly, keeping the truck in low gear and stopping more than once to make sure I was still on the markers. When I finally reached a place with signal, dispatch called me. They asked what I'd been doing overnight and said the sensors had been manually reset several times, all logged from the hut terminal under the local maintenance account. I told them I'd unplugged the terminal and explained when that had been, and there was a long pause on the line before they said they'd send another crew later in the week. As far as I know, they never put a clear cause in the report. 2 weeks later, they replaced the equipment, changed the access system, and updated the logging process. Not long after that, they also changed the policy about solo winter callouts. I don't take those jobs anymore. I have no idea what was wrong with that maintenance station, but it sure made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It was supposed to be a reset, just me and my best friend Chloe, driving for hours into the mountains to a cabin we found on a hidden gems rental site. Our car started overheating about 20 miles from the GPS coordinates, right as the sun started dipping behind the peaks. The host, a guy named Vance, had been super helpful over text. When we told him we were stranded, he offered to come pick us up in his truck and tow our car later. That was the first moment I should have listened to my gut. Why was he so eager to come get us himself? By the time he pulled up, my phone was at 4%. Chloe's was already dead. Vance was fine. He was mountain man handsome, maybe 30, and had this calm, slow way of talking. We hopped in, feeling relieved. About 10 minutes into the drive, my phone finally flickered and died. I asked Vance if he had a lightning cable. No, he said. Just no. He didn't offer a different cord, didn't apologize. He just kept his eyes on the road. That's when I noticed we weren't on the main forest road anymore. We were climbing higher into the canyons, onto roads that were barely more than deer trails. I looked at Chloe, and I could see the same shadow crossing her face. But we were drunk on the situation, exhausted and trapped in a moving vehicle. We didn't want to make it awkward by accusing him of going the wrong way. "Where's the cabin exactly?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't look at me. "A little further. I thought you ladies might want the true wilderness experience." Vance drove another 3 miles down a pitch-black dirt path until the trees opened up to this place. It wasn't the A-frame from the website. It was a low-slung, gray wood shack with horizontal tongue-and-groove siding that looked like it was rotting off the frame. No lights, no other cars, just a dead-end circle in the dirt. He killed the engine. The silence was so heavy, it felt like it was pressing against my eardrums. "I think there's been a mistake," Chloe whispered. "This isn't the place we booked." Vance didn't move. He just stared at the cabin door. "You know," he said, his voice getting flatter, less human. "I like people who test their limits. Most girls are so protected, they never know what they're actually capable of until they're pushed into the deep end." My blood turned to ice. He started talking about the beauty of shock, how if you put a person through enough pain, their brain eventually breaks and starts to crave it. He said it was the fastest way to find your true self. I grabbed the door handle, but it was locked from the driver's side. I saw his phone in the center console and reached for it. I was going to scream for Siri to call 911, but he snatched it so fast. He held it behind his head, looking at me with this terrifying, mock fatherly half smile, like he was proud of me for trying. "Let's go inside," he said, his voice turning gruff. "I have some friends in there. They've been waiting to meet you." That's when I lied. I've never lied so hard in my life. "My boyfriend has our GPS coordinates," I snapped, my voice shaking. "I sent him a screenshot of your profile and your plate before my phone died. He's a cop. If we don't check in by midnight, he's coming here with the county sheriff." The air in the truck changed. I could hear Vance breathing, heavy, frustrated grunts. He gripped the steering wheel so hard, the leather groaned. He sat there for a full minute, just vibrating with rage. Then, he slammed the truck into reverse. He didn't say a word the whole way back. He drove with the headlights off, navigating those canyon cliffs in near total darkness. I thought we were going to go over the edge. He didn't take us back to our car. He drove 40 miles in the opposite direction and threw us out at a gas station. He didn't even wait for us to clear the door. He shoved Chloe, grabbed our bags, and flung them onto the gravel before peeling out with the passenger door still swinging open. And I had never been so glad to be stranded. I don't go hiking anymore, and I never, ever let my phone die. I hope these stories helped you relax tonight. As we end, I'd love your thoughts on the new visual style I'm testing. Does it help with the immersion? I built the landscape in Unreal Engine 5, something I've spent the past few weeks learning. If you enjoy listening with your screen off, remember, you can find these stories on Spotify. It's completely free. And to support the channel directly and help keep the stories coming, please consider checking out my Patreon, where you will get the first look at all episodes before they are made public. You'll have access to behind-the-scenes content and more. The links are in the description. For now, quiet your mind, and I'll see you in the next one.